Okay, previously we've launched two virtual boxes using Vagrant. The first one was named Simbulu, which is gonna be our future primary server. As you all know, before we effectively implement the high availability in Postgres database management system, we need to have more than one operating system, or we can use the concept of nodes when we're talking about clusters, or use the virtual machine or the EC2 instance if you're using AWS. But in this demonstration, I am assuming that those two virtual machines will represent any operating system or VirtualBox on your on-premise resources. Let's see onto where our Vagrant file are located. Postgres HA, and we need to launch our two virtual machines. Do that, we're gonna use Vagrant app. We can use Vagrant app launching those two virtual machines, but I prefer launching one after another. So Vagrant app Simbulu, or it's actually Simbolo. Simbulu is just a name. So Simbulu means the root, primary, the first. So we are launching our primary server. It's not a server yet, but in this virtual machine, we will install Postgres. I'll pause here for a second and then I'll be right back. Okay, we've successfully launched our primary operating system, or our future primary server. So let's make sure that that virtual machine is running. To do so, we can SSH onto Vagrant, SSH onto Simbulu. We are in. Okay, we need to install Postgres 14. For this video, you can also use the Postgres 15, but I prefer, Postgres 14. Why? It's just my preference. Okay, let's install Postgres. And I'm using Ubuntu, so I'm not gonna use yum as we do on Red Hat or Amazon, Linux. I'm gonna use the aptitude or apt, sudo apt install Postgres 14. Oh wait, we unable to locate package Postgres 14. Why? Maybe we need to update the list of remote repositories so that Ubuntu should be able to find those repositories relating to Postgres. So to do that, sudo apt update. Okay, we've updated the list of remote repository. Let's try again. Sudo apt get or apt install Postgres 14. Okay, it cannot find it. Why it cannot find it? Because we've counted an error with no package error. So we are using the Ubuntu 18, which is the Bionic 64. And the Postgres 14 was released after the Bionic 64. We want to make sure we update our repository list with the new repository URL so that our Ubuntu should be able to go out there and find the Postgres 14 and download it for us. Let's update our repository list in Ubuntu. So we're gonna echo this line to our repository or package list. What are we gonna echo? http://apt postgres.org/pub repo/apt. We pass our Ubuntu, we get the Ubuntu version, we pass our Ubuntu version, our Linux version, release cs pg dg main. and then we append that to etc apt/sources dot list dot d/pg dg dot list. So that's append. That's not all. We also need to make sure that we update the GP key so that it can authenticate when we are trying to download the package from the remote repository. So to do that, we use wget, just telling to be quiet, https www.postgres media/key/accc4cf8.asc. we pipe that to sudo apt key add and dash. Should retain OK. So now we need to update our our package list again by using sudo apt yes update. Now it's updating our list of remote packages, so we should be able to go out there and install Postgres 14. Okay, we need to ignore this message saying that 61 package can be upgraded, which means, we are back. We're still using Ubuntu 18, so Ubuntu is suggesting to us to updates, which will lead us to upgrade to Ubuntu 21 or 20. So we don't need to do that. We still want to use our Ubuntu 18. Let's go back and issue a command sudo apt install Postgres 14. Now we can see we can go out there, find the remote repository for Postgres and start downloading Postgres. This will take approximately 1 minute and some seconds. So we should wait. There are some small error when trying to decompress all the packages, or if you see this error, it's usually happening because our operating system is a little bit behind. You can to fix that, you can just issue the command again and Ubuntu will fix that. Yes, bear in mind that we are not using a really pure operating system. We are using an image that we are launching on the virtual machine, so the files are kind of like light, so it should take. Now it's going. If you see those messages, it means that it's passing, which means Ubuntu were able to unzip or decompress all the file and start installing Postgres. Postgres, we were able to set the time zone to UTC, so which is good. Cool. So we've successfully installed, this is the simple installation and this is now configuration. So to make sure that our Postgres is running, we can either use the etc init Postgres status. We get our Postgres, you can see it's active. It means Postgres is running on this VirtualBox. Now let's go back SSH onto our future standby server and install Postgres as well. Feel free to skip if you can. cd onto Postgres, onto documents, Postgres HA to find our vagrant file, and list to make sure that we have our vagrant file. Now we need to run or launch our standby server. So to do that, we will issue vagrant app Kambove. Kambove is our secondary server or standby server. So I'll pause here for a second and then I'll be right back. Okay, Kambove, our standby server is running. Let's SSH onto it. Vagrant SSH to Kambove. Okay, we are in Kambove. So now let's install Postgres. Feel free to skip this steps or things, they are sort of a repeating of commands or action we've done to set up or to install Postgres on Simbulu, our primary server. Or you can watch with me, okay? Sudo, we're going to append our repository apt.postgres.org/pub repo apt. We grab the Linux operating system version, LSP release -pgdg main. We append that to etc apt.sources.list.dpgdg.list. Also, we need to apply the new key wget. Do it quickly. Outputs https www.postgres.org/media key acc. It should be key. Okay, so now let's update our repository list. So now we are updating our list of repositories, so we should be able to install Postgres. If you're using Ubuntu 21 LTS, you should be able to install Postgres 14 without any updates on your repository list. Okay, now we're good. We gotta install Postgres 14 now. Sudo apt install yes Postgres 14. Should be Postgres-14. Now our Ubuntu 18, the Bionic, is able to go find the Postgres 14, download the package, extract that, and install that for us. Well, I'll pause here for a second and I'll be right back when the installation is completed. Now we need to configure our Postgres. We will start with, let me create this tab in the middle so I can make it, demarcation between the primary server and the secondary server. Let's make sure that our Postgres is running on the status on Cambover. Sudo service Postgres status. So Postgres is running our standby. Okay, now we need to go back on our primary and start configuring our primary server. Now here is the way you configure your Postgres. The first thing you need to do is you need to change the password of the user Postgres. Set the password and change the password. You shouldn't be using the default setting from the installation. Let me show you something. If we do sudo -user Postgres, right, PLS, let's make sure that the Postgres client is installed. psql, now we have our Postgres client is installed. So if we issue a command sudo -user Postgres PLS -d says the database Postgres, and we press enter. Now we can log into Postgres database, which is our main database in Postgres database management. So you don't wanna, as a professional, if you wanna set up Postgres as you should, you don't want to allow this by default. Why? If someone is, if someone were able to sudo your server, they will be able also to sudo onto Postgres user, and thereby having the full or access to all objects. By object, I mean database, tables, views onto your database management system. I mean on your operating system. So you want to update. The first thing to do is update the password for Postgres. How do we do that? What we do when we are, as soon as we log in onto the database, we see all the database we have the default Postgres, template 01, templates and 1. So now we need to update the password. We issue the command alter, which comes from Latin order, but it's also English words. Modify. Alter. What are we gonna alter? We're gonna alter object role. We're gonna alter that with password. Right? If I do not miss it with password, let's name the password. Since this is our main super user, let's use the password okapi hashtag star 5634 okapi hashtag star 5634. Okay, we need to specify the role. So alter role, which role are we trying to specify? Let me clear that so we can make it. Let me clear that. So alter role Postgres, our current role, with password okapi hashtag star 5634. Okay, now we've altered the default password for Postgres. Okay, so that's our password okapi hashtag star 56. Oh, this is still not a good password. It should be longer. Usually I type my password in such a way that I will never remember that. Usually my password is approximately 100 characters or more than 100 characters. Yeah, that's the way I create my password. So let's try it out. To quit the database, to quit the connection, \Q will allow you to quit it. There we go. Now let's go back. Let's try it different way. If we do the H symbolize the host, local host, the D for the database, Postgres, and the U for the user. The U should be capital, not small u. Postgres. Now you can see it's asking us for password. What is our password? Okapi hashtag star 5634. Now we can authenticate, we can log into our database with password. But let me show you something which is crazy. If we go back, we use a sudo user Postgres d Postgres. Unfortunately, we can still authenticate even though we've changed the password. Since we are using the sudo, which have high priority, we are using the Postgres user, and the Postgres user and the Postgres is sort of the super user that control almost everything. But there is a way we can do that. We look at that in a couple of minutes forward. Okay, let's quit. Next, so what should we do now? Now we've installed Postgres on this primary server. We have changed the password for the Postgres just to avoid default authentication. Now what we need to do is that we need to create a new user. Let's go back to Postgres. Let's create a new user. So to create a new user in Postgres, we will issue the command create role. Right, so we are creating an object role. Let's name that role. I need to name it something that is exotic. Why exotic? Yeah, let's name it Uwele. Right, we create a role Uwele with login. So which means that this role should have a login. So we create that role. The role is created. Let me see. I think we do it like this. Yeah, that's the way you can see the user. A \du plus will allow you to see all the user. As you can see now, we have Postgres and we have the Uwele. Uwele is a place somewhere in the richest country in the world. Shout out to the richest country to the world. You know what I'm saying? Okay, Let's continue. We've created our user. Now we need to create a database that can be only accessed using the host-based authentication that can only be accessed by this user. To do that, create db create database with what is the name of the database? We call the database, let me just call it a person, simple. And the owner of the database will be Huele. Huele will be the owner of the person. Okay. Now our database has been created. Cool. So what should we do now? We'll create the user. We create a new database that the owner will be Huele. Bear in mind, even if we assign the owner to be Huele, it's only certain within certain contexts. In the context of sudo use a Postgres will still be able to authenticate to Uele. But if we are using, if you want to authenticate to Uele via the host-based authentication, I mean the host kind of like the HTTP, the TCP using the domain, using the IP, we won't be able to authenticate. Even Postgres won't be able to authenticate to Uele. We need to modify this configuration. I'll show you how we can modify that in a few minutes. Okay, so now we need to connect to, we can set the password for Uele here, but I'll prefer that we connect for Uele first. We connect onto Uele before we change the password. Database, oh, the database is person. What am I talking about? We need to connect, Uele is a user. Let's connect to the database person. Okay, now we've connected to the database person from Postgres or as a user Postgres. Now we need to update the password of Huele. While we're doing that, we could have updated the password on Postgres, but we want to change the context. Just in case if you want your user Huele to authenticate using the MD5 encryption, you can set that on the database instead of setting that on the super user. If you want your user to use the scram hash, which is the new way of it's kind of like the advanced algorithm over the MD5, because the MD5 is only as reliable if you add salt, but the scram password will not only prevent brute force as far as we know, but it can also protect your password with automatic hashing and salt. Okay, so let's set the before we update the user password for Uele, we need to update the encryption. Set password encryption equal to scram SHA 256. The scram SHA 256, right? We set the password encryption. We could have used MD5 here, MD5, but we used that one, the scram SHA 256. Now we need to update, we need to create a password for Uele. To do that, we alter Uele, alter role, Uele password. Let's set the password Kambove, so I can remember easily. Hashtag *5834. Okay, I need to copy that, paste that somewhere so I cannot forget. And I'm not recommending somebody to create a password as short as this one. This is so short. Make sure your password is at least, if you want to be serious about your password, it should be at least 20 to 36 characters, Okay, yeah. So we've updated the Uele user with a new password in its own context, which is the database that is owned by Uele. That's the best way to update the password. Okay, now we can exit person. Next, so what should we do? And we're still configuring our primary server. Next, we need to make sure that we allow any user outside of our Symbodo server. Mainly, we are referring somebody that is on Kambove, which is gonna be our future or standby server. We wanna allow Kambove to authenticate onto person to Symbodo server, which is our primary. Let me show you something. PLS-H let me ping our primary face. 192.168.56.4. Send how many package? Send that 3 times. Okay, it is true that the standby server can send and receive package from the primary, but if we issue the command to authenticate onto the person database that we've just created, so the -H stands for the host 192.168.56.4. The D is for the database person, and the capital U is for the user. The user is Willie. It cannot authenticate. So to authenticate that, to allow this authentication, we need to modify the host-based authentication file from the primary. I'm not saying on the standby, from the primary. The primary server has to allow the future standby to authenticate onto any database that is in control of. Okay, so sudo nano, you can use vi too or vim. Let's try to use vi, it's kind of fine. So vi etc postgres, the version 14 main, and this file can be changed. You can move your pg HBA configuration. You shouldn't be, if you go to advanced security, when you're configuring a database for strong security, don't leave your PG HBA here, because everybody knows it's located there. Move it somewhere, but I'm not a security expert. I'm not trying to be a security expert here. I'm just having fun and sharing some knowledge. Okay, so let's open that file. Now, we are about to allow Kambove to authenticate, any server, any machine to authenticate onto primary and log into person database. If you are not familiar with this the HBA configuration, the host-based configuration file, just go to Postgres or www.postgres.org/docs. You will see the documentation about that. But to show you how to do that, instead of doing that on local section, we're gonna do that on the host section. As you can see, we have the host authenticate to all database from all user, and this is the configuration that's allowing the Postgres super user to authenticate to person, even if we've changed the person password. Okay, now so if you want to start modifying when you're using vi, just click I. When you click I, you will see the insert mode is activated, which means you can now insert character. I know a lot of people don't like vi, but it is what it is. So what is our method or mode of authentication, which is host? What's gonna be the database? The second option is for the database. The database will be person, and the user will be Huele. Should authenticate from where? From 192.168 2.56, and from here we are dealing with the network ID, and we pass 0, which is gonna be the host ID. And since we are using class C, should I have said, we're gonna use the CIDR will be with 24 bits. Yes, with 24 bits. Please make sure you don't use 32 here. It's not gonna allow you. Just use 24. Well, you can use 32, but since we are already using a lot of bits here on 56, we should use 24. Okay. This is not a network class, but just to let you know. And we want the authentication when you are using Uele. You use your password or encryption should be the Scrum SSH 256. 256. Okay. Let's save. Okay. Oh, this is not nano. I'm trying to type Control O so I can save. You don't do that with VI. Click escape. We click escape button and click again, colon WQ, and we're telling VI write and quit immediately. Okay, now we can, there are some configuration, usually the configuration on PG, HBA, the only way you can apply that just with a simple reload of the server. But there are some configuration that require a full restart of the server to apply modification. So to do that, we do sudo systemctl reload postgres. Let's get status postgres still running. Now we need to verify first, as soon as you change the host-based authentication configuration, the first thing you need to do, you need to try that configuration, that authentication first on your, local machine. If the IP is applicable, like in our case, the class IP, the network IP is applicable both for the Simbulu and the Kambove server. Kambove being the standby server, Simbulu being the primary. Okay, let's try that. We use the Postgres client, psql-h 192.168.56.4. The database will be person. The user will be Uele. Okay, what's happening here? Why? What's happening here, although we've changed the HBA configuration to allow a range of IP to authenticate onto Simbulu server, since there is one configuration the Postgres has set as a default, still in the context of security, in terms of security, so that, only user, I'll say it again, only user from local host can authenticate onto a database by default. So we need to modify that. That's sudo vi onto, I'll use nano because nano is, simple. We go to the main Postgres configuration file. So Postgres 14 main Postgres config. So we are not using pghba.conf, we're using the Postgres config. Enter. Now, if you want to search something on nano, as it says here, you can just Control W, we say where is. So I'll tap Control W and say where is listen. You find me listen address. So you see, by default, Postgres allow only authentication from the local host, which is good, right? But if you want to do remote authentication, you need to set this to a range of IP, what is the IP address, or you can point star so you can allow, connection from something like this, right? So I can either use this to set from anything, or I can just use star. I'll just use star. So from now on, the Postgres instance on this virtual machine will allow authentication from everywhere. Okay. We'll be using this file as we continue in this series on high availability disaster recovery, where we will implement continuous archiving. I will show you we need to go back to this file and do some configuration. Okay, now we need to save that. To save with nano, it's Control O, and now you have the prompt. You can just click enter to confirm. Now it's saved, and Control X to exit. Now we exit. Since we've touched the Postgres configuration file, I would prefer to restart. You can also reload if it can be applicable, but I always do restart. Sudo etc init.d/postgres restart. Restarting Postgres. Let's check the status. Okay, it's running. Now let's go back. Now we allow Postgres to listen not only from local, but you can also listen from remote call. You know, I'm not talking about remote call in the software engineering context where you run your function remotely, but I'm talking about remote call in the context of networking. Okay, now Postgres can listen from remote IP, any IP. Let's try psql-h 192.168.56.4. The database should be person and the user should be Willie. Now you can see Postgres now should be able to listen to any IP, and then it's listening from 192. Why? I thought it's still the same machine, this IP for this same machine. Yes, although this IP is for this same machine, but in networking there is a difference between local host, which is the default DNS pointing from the loopback host, the 127, and this IP that is pointing for the main car and using a specific MAC address. Yeah, that's network stuff. But this is the way you can just get in. Now let's type our password. Our password is Kambove. What was that? Hashtag *5834. We missed the password. Kambove hashtag. Yeah, you need to make sure the password is correct. I was not typing something. I don't know what I was typing. So I think it's correct now. Now we can list the database from person. Yeah, we can see, person I can at least list the database, but okay. Now let's quit. Now we've authenticated, from itself, from the Simbulu. Now how can Kambove authenticate to the primary? We need this authentication. Without authentication between the standby server and the primary server, there is no high availability. There is no even continuous replication or a continuous archiving. So we need authentication between the primary and the standby server. Let's go to our standby server. Let's try that again. psql-h 192.168.56.11.4. The user is the database is person. We're using that, and the user is Willie. Okay, now let's type our password. 5634. Yeah. Kambove hashtag *5834. There we go. That's it. So we were able to authenticate from the Kambove server, the standby. Now here we can even create a table. Let's create a table. Create table. Let's name the table. Let's just name it person again, without creating the ID. Let's create a key, a field ID. It's gonna be an int. It's gonna be primary key generate. We wanna generate default as identity. So this ID will be generated by default, which is 1, 2, 3 automatically. If you want to reset that, you have to go reset the sequence manually, which is another topic for another tutorial or video. First and first, we need the first name of the person, and the first name can be varchar. Let's use 25 character, and the last name varchar 20. Let's name that 34. That's all. It doesn't want the primary key. Primary key generates by default. Okay, let me clear this. Let me clear this so I can repeat that. So primary key, int primary key generate by default as identity, first name varchar, last name varchar. Okay, we create our table. To view the table in Postgres, like a \d, yeah. Our table, as you can see, we have a table name person, and we have the sequence or person ID. The sequence person ID is the one that's in charge of generating automatically the ID for our person. So now we can write query from the standby. Although there are different ways to manage the standby versus the primary. Usually you shouldn't be creating table on the standby. We are not using the standby server. We are authenticating to the database, the primary database, and we are writing query on the primary database. Okay, let's quit and finish with this video because I don't want that to get so long. We don't want to spend a lot of time here. So we have to conclude with the Kambove. As of now, Kambove doesn't need further configuration. We will see in the next video when we start implementing the continuous archiving. We will look at further configuration on the primary. But as of now, I think we are done. We were able to install Postgres both on the primary and the standby. If you are starting, there is a recommendation. If you are starting or setting up a high availability in your Postgres, you need to make sure at least at the beginning, both the version of your primary and the version of your standby are similar. You don't want to install the primary now and then later on you want to install the standby. Well, at least if the standby has the latest version, that makes sense. But the primary should not have the latest version and the standby. Let's say the primary has the version 15. You shouldn't put the version 14 on the standby. There will be some, incongruency, and there will be some problem when syncing data between the primary and the server. So I'm gonna close here. In this video, we learn how to install Postgres on more than one instance. We configure with minimum security concern. We configure the primary so that the primary should not use the default password. We set the password for Postgres user. We've set up the host-based authentication, the primary, so that the primary can not only listen to the connection from itself, but also listen to the connection from other instances throughout the network or out of the network. Thank you for watching. I will see you in the next video. Make sure you tune in. On the next video, I will start one of the most critical video on this series, continuous archiving, where we talk about the file WoW, the write-ahead log file in Postgres, and how to do continuous archiving, and how to do the setup, how to do backup and continuous backup. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next video.